Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this Voices for Action webinar. So before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Leif, if you could share the agenda slide, please. Part of the session will be recorded for future sharing. We invite you to use the chat to introduce yourself, where you're joining from, the city or organization where you work. This presentation is in English and closed captioning is available. All participants will be muted and your video will be turned off. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please submit them using the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen, and time permitting, we'll try and answer all of these at the end of the webinar. We've got a lot to cover in just 60 minutes today, so additional resources, reports, and websites that are mentioned by our speakers will be shared in the chat and also in a follow-up email that will be sent to you after the webinar. After leaving the webinar, you'll have the option to complete a short survey, and we very much appreciate your thoughtful feedback as it helps us to inform future sessions. So as we begin, I'd like to start us off in a good way with an acknowledgement of the land that I'm on. I'm located here in Toronto, a word that's derived from Mohawk that means where there are trees standing in the water. Today, Toronto is covered under Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties, and it's the traditional territories of many First Peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon wampum, a treaty where nations entered into an agreement to protect the land and responsibly care for its resources in harmony together. As settlers, newcomers, refugees, Indigenous people, we have all been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace and friendship and respect. I'm mindful of broken treaties that persist across Turtle Island today, and I recognize our responsibilities as treaty people to engage in meaningful, continuous process of truth and reconciliation with all of our relations. GCC is committed to advancing decolonization and anti-racism while working and centering the voices, leadership, and joy of Black, Indigenous, racialized, trans, and non-binary communities. While this work is underway, it is never over. It's informed by our approach to internal processes, programming, philanthropic strategy, and the future that we envision together. Today's session reflects our commitment to an equitable and just climate transition. Leif, if you can go to oh, you're already there, ahead of me. So to start, we know that sustainable and climate-ready communities are needed, and we know that this need is urgent. For over 30 years, Green Communities Canada has connected and supported community organizations across the country to accelerate climate action. We're deeply focused not just on the why we should take climate action, but the how. How do we make the momentous shifts that are needed in such a short period of time? How do we address the very real barriers that communities, and particularly marginalized communities, face to taking action? How do we ensure that our work is intersectional and inclusive? And how do we make these shifts last? That's a big focus for this webinar. Our programs are diverse and always transforming, but our goal remains the same: invest in building the local capacity needed to accelerate ambitious climate action. Next slide. Today, we support more than 100 organizations, and together we drive equitable and transformative change from coast to coast to coast. We do this by providing a network for organizations to share resources and knowledge, offering programming and services that organizations can roll out on the ground, and funding the organizations to lead this vital work. Next slide. Our work at GCC focuses on three main areas of climate impact: sustainable mobility, residential energy efficiency, and green infrastructure, which is the theme for this webinar. GCC has been leading green infrastructure programs for more than a decade. Green infrastructure is one of the many ways of leveraging nature-based solutions to address the dual challenges of both the climate crisis and the loss of natural habitats. When compared to the climate change solutions that often get a little bit more attention in the news, like electric cars or carbon capture technology, nature-based solutions are far more cost-effective and deliver broad-based equitable benefits. In 2022, we launched the Living Cities Canada project, which aims to measurably accelerate the growth of nature-rich cities, increasing community resilience, health, and vitality. Our Living Cities Canada Fund, which is part of our broader strategy, provides communities with the direct financial support and structured processes to build capacity, leadership, and momentum for green infrastructure. Since creating the fund, GCC has supported over 100 green infrastructure projects in communities across Canada. In 2025 alone, our projects restored over 32,000 square meters of urban land, which is no small feat because, as we all know, urban projects, while critical, are often more resource intensive. Notably, over 70% of these projects were led by or directly engaged equity deserving groups. We're looking forward to announcing the recipients of our 2026 Demonstrate Stream of the Living Cities Canada Fund that will be happening this week, the week of Earth Week, April 22nd. To learn more, visit our website, and Saida will put the link in the chat. Before I pass it to Jared and our truly incredible panelists, I want to recognize some of the generous supporters of our 2025 and 2026 Living Cities Canada Fund: Definity Insurance Corporation, RBC Foundation, Heart Lake Foundation, and several other private philanthropic foundations. I also want to give a big shout out to Trees for Life for joining us as a delivery partner in 2025 and 2026. Now I'm pleased to hand it off to our wonderful host today, Jared, who's GCC's Managing Director, to introduce our panelists. Over to you, Jared.
Thanks so much, Brianna. We're thrilled to have everybody with us here today, and I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. We've got a total of five different panelists with us this afternoon, depending on where you're coming from. Perhaps this morning. Hello, good morning to our West Coast attendees. But in reverse order from how our presentations will be rolling out. First, I've got the pleasure of introducing Marina Gosselin from Ganawage Environmental Protection Office, where she has worked for the last 5 years as Environmental Projects Coordinator for climate change. In this role, Marina has worked on several planting projects that include a food forest and planting trees to offset the impacts of urban heat, island effect, using satellite imagery to determine the optimal planting sites in the community. Her work has included initiatives that raise awareness on climate change and the impacts on the community. Next is Heather Addy with the Calgary Climate Hub. Heather fell in love with plant biology and undergraduate field courses at the University of Alberta, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in Botany and a Master's of Science in Plant Ecology. Subsequent field work in the mountains and boreal forest. Sounds fantastic. With Alberta Environment and the University of Alberta sparked her interest in mycorrhizal, I think that's how I pronounce that, associations, leading to a PhD in soil plant relations at the University of Guelph. She retired from her work at the University of Calgary in 2022 and now volunteers with the Calgary Climate Hub, where she co-leads the mini forest planting program. Welcome, Heather. Jay Cranstone with the City of Guelph. He plays the role of Natural Areas Stewardship Technologist with the City of Guelph. And he's got over 30 years of experience as a landscape architect, practicing an environmentally, socially, and culturally sustainable approach to creating spaces. And Jay came to Guelph, Ontario in 1987 to complete a master's degree in landscape architecture. And over the 25 years in private sector consulting with local and international firms, after that time, Jay joined the City of Guelph Parks Operations team in 2019, and it's been working to reach Guelph's ambitious goal of achieving 40% canopy cover, and has coached many volunteers at planting projects supported by Green Communities Canada. Welcome, Jay. Karen Fisher-Favret is the instructor of ecosystem ecology and wildlife management at McGill University, and currently teaches ecosystem ecology and fisheries and wildlife management at McGill, and coordinates the Finding Urban Nature team, the FUN team, at Concordia's Science College. She holds a PhD in biological oceanography from Cornell University. And her education and research experience span a number of different organizations. And I was pleased to see Dalhousie University on the list, my alma mater. Finally, Tiana Mighty, our green infrastructure lead here at Green Communities Canada. Welcome, Tiana. Since 2022, Tiana has been working with GCC and our green infrastructure team. She has been leading our New Living Cities Thriving Microgrant stream, which addresses a major gap in funding support for maintenance in the green infrastructure sector. She holds a BA in environmental science from the University of Manitoba, and has worked as the climate change adaptation assistant for the rural municipality of East St. Paul, and as a biodiversity researcher at Nature Canada. We're going to hand it over to Tiana for our first presentation. Over to you, Tiana, for your opening comments.
Thank you, Jared, for the introduction. So today I'll be speaking briefly about GCC's work with a particular focus on our growing efforts in the maintenance and long-term stewardship of green infrastructure. So as Brianna mentioned, in 2025, we supported 37 green infrastructure projects, which took place on over 60 green infrastructure sites across 25 communities in 8 provinces. These projects engaged more than 4,000 volunteers, including over 2,400 youth. And altogether, these projects planted over 12,100 plants, including nearly 4,500 urban trees, and transformed more than 32,000 square meters of urban land. These projects span a wide range of green infrastructure. They included mini forests, food forests, tree plantings, pollinator gardens, rain gardens, deep paves, and community gardens. But importantly, a significant number of our 2025 projects were focused on maintenance. And this reflects a shift in understanding that building green infrastructure is only the first step and that long-term care is essential. Next slide, please. The Thriving Microgrant stream of the Living Cities Canada Fund was designed specifically to support maintenance and monitoring of existing green infrastructure sites. We launched this stream in 2025, and it provides small grants of up to $5,000 over 6 to 12 months. Projects are volunteer-driven and include activities like watering, weeding, mulching, and replanting. A key component of this stream is that planning for future stewardship to ensure long-term sustainability. This stream helps to fill a critical gap in funding for ongoing care. 2026 intake for the Thriving Microgrant stream is now closed, and we are looking forward to announcing the projects we will be funding this year shortly. Next slide. So the Thriving Microgrant stream was created with feedback from a lot of our partner organizations. One of the biggest challenges that we hear is that maintenance funding is just so much harder to secure than installation funding. Most funding opportunities prioritize building new infrastructure and new plantings, and there is really limited support for replacement plantings, for staff time, tools, and volunteer coordination, which is essential for long-term maintenance. This creates a gap where sites are built, but they are not always supported to thrive over time. Next slide. So we've learned that as green infrastructure sites mature, their maintenance needs evolve. However, the funding does not grow alongside those needs, and this lack of funding for maintenance activities ends up leaving sites vulnerable. Next slide. So why does this matter? So without adequate maintenance, GI is not properly protected or planned for and designed and constructed. So sites become vulnerable and they may fail to deliver their intended benefits. We've also seen that in many cases, site hosts have not fully accounted for the life cycle costs of green infrastructure over the long term. And this really highlights the importance of planning for maintenance from the start. Although sometimes GI can be cheaper to build upfront than great infrastructure, maintenance and monitoring are often overlooked, underfunded, and understaffed, as is the case with great infrastructure as well. Next slide. We have found that there is strong evidence that green infrastructure can be more cost-effective than great alternatives. One study found that after evaluating 479 different green infrastructure projects, they found that 75% of those projects were cheaper or equal to in cost than their gray alternatives. The US Environmental Protection Agency has estimated a 15 to 80% cost savings for green infrastructure compared to conventional gray stormwater systems. And a study done found that in Philadelphia, implementing a new green infrastructure plan would project to cost around $1.2 billion compared to a similar gray infrastructure plan, which would cost $6 billion. So quite a substantial cost savings there. But however, these cost advantages do depend on proper maintenance and long-term performance as well. Next slide. So all infrastructure requires maintenance, but how we invest in it matters. Uh, Green infrastructure maintenance is typically lower cost and community-based, so it focuses on activities like watering, weeding, and monitoring, which are not unlike traditional landscape or park maintenance activities. These help ensure intended performance, plant survival, and long-term benefits. In contrast, gray infrastructure often involves inspections, repairs, and monitoring activities, and they often involve the need for specialized or technical knowledge to ensure that mechanical and engineered systems remain functioning over the long term. Because these systems are often more centralized, there's higher risks when these systems fail. So, although all infrastructure requires maintenance, investing in green infrastructure maintenance protects cost savings, while gray infrastructure systems often demand higher long-term upkeep. The opportunity in front of us is clear. So, relatively small investments in maintenance can protect and amplify much larger capital investments. And Leif, if you just advance, please. If we want to maximize the many returns of green infrastructure, which includes environmental, social, and financial benefits, we need to prioritize maintenance alongside implementation. Because at the end of the day, the most cost-effective infrastructure is the one that continues to work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tiana. Really appreciate that viewpoint and some of those key learnings. It'll be really interesting to unpack it further during our discussion. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Jay Cranstone for his initial comments and reflections based on his work at the City of Guelph. Over to you, Jay.
Great, thank you. Just sharing the screen here. All right. Can everybody see that? Great. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to provide a little bit of the municipal perspective from one municipality, the City of Guelph. So just a little background to start. I'm part of the Natural Area Stewardship team, and we're a small team within the larger Forestry and Parks Department. We're a full-time group of 3, and then we expand to about 15 in the peak planting season, which includes some full-time or some 9-month contract folks, as well as some 6-month summer students. We run a variety of programs. So what I've put on here are the programs that we're involved with. They are both run by our crew, but they also involve a lot of interaction with the public. So we do all the invasive species management that the City of Guelph does. We primarily focus on planting and stewardship. We also run a native herbaceous propagation program. We do some meadow management, and then we have a few programs that are directly firing at our residents. So we have a backyard tree giveaway program, a community gardens program, and a park stewards program. The park stewards program is really similar to a community gardens program, where a group of interested folks can get together and take care of the park or natural area in their neighborhood. So here's an image of the City of Guelph. The outline in red is the urban boundary. The green are parks, and then the other 3 areas are make up our natural areas. When thinking about why maintenance is important, I sort of settled on a few different themes related to maintenance. First of all, our naturalization program, we plant about 20,000 new native trees and shrubs a year. These are the smaller sized plants, and it's been about 101,000 since 2019. And as far as our larger trees go, we planted about 6,500 since 2019. So you can quickly do the math in your head, and that's a really large investment. So protecting our investment is really important to us. In the early days, when there was community planting done, it was done just by volunteers, and it was plant and leave, leave the plants, no maintenance, and our trees, specimen trees, received some watering. But since that time, we've really thought hard about this, and we've done things like adding a mycorrhizal product at installation, and then we also do regular plant watering. So our naturalization plantings receive a couple of visits per year for their first 2 years. And all of our large trees get watering 6 to 8 times per season, the new trees that are planted, for about 2 years following planting. And the image on the right is just a shot of our GIS watering app that our field crews as well as our managers can see. And we've really been leveraging technology to help us keep track of what needs to be maintained because we recognize the importance of that maintenance. And we've also learned that a dense and diverse naturalization planting really helps out in terms of survival and protecting the investment. Monitoring our naturalization planting areas. Again, we're leveraging technology here to keep track of where we've been. It helps us to track our progress, survival, identify issues and mitigation, and improve our performance really. And we really focus on collecting only the data that we think we're going to need. We don't collect data for data's sake. A second theme is about acceptance and perception, and not everybody sees naturalization in the same light. So we think that it's really important to focus on maintenance so that the work that you've done is viewed as intentional and not left and forgotten. And this site is one of my favorites in the city. It's a meadow planting out in front of our emergency services center in the south end of the city. And it was viewed by the folks that were inside the building as just a weedy mess until we stepped in and started doing some maintenance. So I think it's really important to focus on some maintenance in order to show that you are intentional with what you're doing. Internal coordination is important. So again, we've been focusing on being very intentional with where we're planting, connecting up areas that have been planted in previous years, and so on. It helps us to set our objectives, be systematic and informed about what we're doing, coordinate with other departments to avoid conflicts in future with other park facilities, such as sport field expansions, playground upgrades, and so on. And one of the great things about this technology is that our field crews can see it on the tablets and on their handhelds when they're out there doing the work. So if there are questions that come up, we can answer those quite quickly and easily from the desktop. But I really wanted to focus on, in terms of internal coordination, on turf maintenance. And for those of you that are involved in naturalization projects, that can be a challenge where turf crews don't know what the intentions are. And so we're focusing on trying to avoid that accidental damage to planted and naturalized areas by informing the turf maintenance crews about the objectives and our plans. And in doing this, part of what we do is we're respecting their operational needs to the extent that we can and equipment clearances and so on. And also, really welcoming their insight because we know they're out there in the field day in and day out. They know these spaces very, very well. They can help us find spaces that are candidates for naturalization, but we also want their input on some of the mowing edges. And the photo on the top left is actually when I was out in the field defining a mowing edge for a meadow area that we were trying to establish on a space that was previously just a grassed area. So they've got some input into that as well. And then the last theme that I wanted to bring up is really just focused on a particular type of green infrastructure, and that's stormwater management facilities. We have over 80 of these in the city, mostly ponds and so on. And many of them are close to or they abut our natural areas. And where we get involved is they can be a real source for invasive species, particularly buckthorn and Phragmites. So it's in our own interest as natural area stewards to try to prevent that. And the ponds do require periodic sediment to clean out to maintain their function. But what we're trying to do now is be more proactive with invasive species management. And we've actually been trying to demonstrate to our engineering folks who take care of the stormwater ponds that can lead to extending the performance of the facility and increasing the amount of time before they've got to go back in and do a sediment clean out. And the cost of that is very, very minimal compared to the cost of a full clean out for an individual pond. So I just wanted to kind of bring up those themes. I'm going to stop sharing, bring up those themes as to get everybody thinking about maintenance of green infrastructure.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Jay. I keep from Tiana to you, from Jay, I've been just keep thinking about this, that old adage of an ounce of prevention compared to a pound of cure, right? And it's gonna this will be a thread that we'll be pulling the whole way through this afternoon. That said, over to you, Heather, for your opening comments and view from Alberta.
Thanks, Jared. I have some images, but I'm going to save them and see if they can be used just to illustrate some points. I was just going to chat about a few things. First, just to tell you about the Calgary Climate Hub. So we are a fairly small, fairly new charitable organization I almost said in Guelph, wishful thinking, in Calgary. We're about almost 10 years old. We have 3 employees, and then the rest of the organization is volunteer-led. So we have great support and direction from our executive director and the employees, but the rest of the organization is volunteers that work together to organize and deliver programs. And we have an awful lot of programs for a fairly small organization. We try to give Calgarians a variety of ways to become engaged and active in climate mitigation and pushing back on climate change. So we offer community climate conversations, for example. We have a climate justice program. We have an art of protest program, which is a lot of fun. And then we have some advocacy work where we're advocating to the city primarily for active transportation and tree equity. And as part of that tree equity broader focus, we have the mini forest program, which is where I've spent most of my time. And our mini forests, I know many of you on the call will know about mini forests, but these are very small native species, very densely planted, and they fit very nicely into little pockets within the city. And at the heart of the Miyawaki approach to mini forests is community. And so our approach, like many of yours on the call, is that we partner with community organizations to plant these little forests. And so we have planted, since we started our program in 2022, with support primarily from Green Communities Canada and Alberta Eco Trust, we've planted 5 mini forests. 3 of those have been with community organizations, community associations. 1 has been with a nonprofit community hub. 1 was with a faith community. And there was another one that's sort of, it was a mini forest and now it is not. And perhaps I'll share what we learned from that experience with the city of Calgary. And because so much of what we're doing is with community partners, when we've been thinking and talking about maintenance, especially recently, given some of the challenges we've had, we're really thinking about how to support that community partner, because in the model we use, they are the ones that are responsible for maintenance. We support by providing a sort of a how-to and a checklist for stewardship and a schedule of what needs to happen when. We do hands-on training with them. We'll come out and support, but it's their baby, and we have been sort of leaving it to them to organize volunteers to come out and help with that. And what we're realizing is that maintenance doesn't just mean maintaining the forest, it's also maintaining that community building and maintaining the relationship between the community and the forest. So, I think language really matters, and I think it was in Tiana's slides. When we talk to our partners, we say, do you want to plant a mini forest? And we're realizing that what we need to say now is, do you want to raise a mini forest, or do you want to grow a mini forest? And really emphasize this is a longer term commitment. It's like getting a puppy. The day you bring the puppy home, you aren't done. Now you get to raise the puppy. And the communities often just default to sending out an email saying, we need people to come and weed or maintain the forest. And the language there also matters, because nobody really gets excited about going out weeding and maintaining, but if we can talk about care and nurturing, and if we can help our community partners find ways to leverage that and to encourage that mindset and deepen that relationship, I think that's also part of how the hub needs to be involved in maintenance, is how do we help our community partners with that kind of viewpoint. Some of our community partners choose to bring in contractors to look after the forest. And that has been a real challenge in terms of maintenance, because there isn't that caring about the mini forest when you're a paid contractor. And so we're looking at how can we not only educate and support our community partners, but how could we extend that to perhaps educating some of these landscaping companies and get them thinking about what is different about maintaining a mini forest than a typical shrub planting by the city. So when we're thinking about maintenance, those are a lot of the things we're thinking about, is relationships and community. And I'll leave it there, and hopefully we can, I'm looking forward to picking up on some of these ideas with the rest of you.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Heather. Yeah, there's a really a really rich I think observations there from the field, which will be great to build upon in our discussion. Thanks so much. Next, over to Karen for your in the discussion and opening comments.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here in Montreal. Bonjour, hi. We also I'd like to also go kind of Heather's direction and to kind of show fewer images at this point, but talk to the fact that we have, I guess, many of the same challenges that everybody else is having. We also are volunteer-based maintenance crew. We also have some students who are funded by Canada Summer Jobs who come in every summer. And because our main mandate there with the Finding Urban Nature team is to outreach to community day camps, we have kind of incorporated that aspect, the Canada Summer Jobs and community involvement, into the ongoing maintenance of the microforae that we planted. I'm coming in from the side of kind of academia, and my goal is to try to measure these trees and see how much carbon there is in them and what we can do to start to incorporate that into global carbon models at the larger scale, taking the small scale green that we do create and putting it into the larger global context, mainly so that we can justify to people how this meets the sustainability goals that places are setting. To reach carbon neutrality is one of the main reasons why I think companies come in and help pay for these plantings. And that also, like along the lines of what Heather is saying, we're not planting a microforest or a mini forest. We're trying to create one, grow it, and have it be a gathering space for the community as well. And here in Montreal, the effort to make it be a gathering space as opposed to a place where we plant trees to reach a sustainability goal, I think is something that we can work on more as a group. But I do want to hand it off so that we can have the discussion, and so I'd rather not present.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Karen. Finally, in terms of opening comments and discussions, Marina, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I will share photos. Did some projects that we're working on here at the Ganawagi Environment Protection Office. Okay, just bear with me for a second. Okay, can you see just my presentation slides?
Yep,
Okay,
looks good.
perfect. Oops, I'll skip back a little bit. All right, here we are. All right, so I work at the Ganawagi Environment Protection Office. I've worked there for about 5 years, as Jared mentioned earlier on. So the projects that we work on are a little bit different from maybe other municipalities. We tend to work on restoration or remediation of ecosystems and yeah, in the community. So these are areas that have been typically affected by kind of large industrial projects, thinking of like the St. Lawrence Seaway. There's a lot of industrial activity around us. So Ganawaga sort of tends to be this little green island surrounded by kind of industrial areas and farms. So we do have a lot of work ahead of us in terms of restoring some areas. So the projects I'll talk about kind of focus on that restoration and kind of what that entails in terms of maintaining them. So we're talking more about like natural asset restoration, not so much like engineered green infrastructure in this case. So maybe that differs a little bit. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the North Creek restoration. So this project, uh, it was done about last year, and the idea was to improve the flow of a creek that runs through the main village and the residential area of Gotawage. So in the past, that creek was used for fishing. Kids used to play in that creek, catch frogs. So it was quite a lively sort of place. And then over time, with residential and commercial development, the creek was affected by infrastructure projects with culverts that kind of reduced the stream flow, and then it was sort of overrun with invasive species like Phragmites, which just tended to clog the flow of the water. And so at times there was hardly any flow, and then when there was, it was very slow. So we basically, everyone was starting to call this like the Stinky Creek because it was just really unpleasant. So then the restoration project sort of involved putting in bigger culverts to kind of reduce the risk of flood. The banks of the stream were cleared of the Phragmites, and we planted all native species. And then the channel was widened in areas where in the past it had previously been wider, so trying to bring back some of that natural, like the natural state of the natural flow of the creek. The main work on the project was completed just a few months ago. And then, so in terms of the maintenance, this was a, we'll just go back a step. This was a very kind of collaborative project where there was a lot of community engagement. All the neighbors who had their properties along the stream, they were notified. They came to the meetings to see what was going to be done. And so kind of to go to the maintenance of that, we're hoping that there'll be some collaboration with that as well, because they'll be able to tell us if there's invasive species coming back. They'll be able to report to us on the flow of the water, if there's fish or frogs coming back. So we're hoping that that community engagement will play an important role in the maintenance of the site. And then as well, like the kind of more typical infrastructure parts of it, like the gray infrastructure, if you will, um, like culverts, that will be taken over by Public Works as they have the experience of managing that sort of infrastructure. So I think it'll be definitely a collaborative effort in terms of maintenance over time, which could be part of the challenge, I suppose. And then KEPO, the Environment Protection Office, will obviously be keeping an eye on it over time, because we also do water quality evaluations of the area, so we're always sort of around there anyways. All right, so the next project is a food forest, which we planted on Degawita Island. This island was actually made by the creation of the seaway. It's basically made up of dredged materials, so you can imagine that the soil is quite terrible. It's very rocky, and basically it's just overrun with weeds and poplars and buckthorn. So we wanted to see what we could do with the site. And so we used a permaculture approach to kind of try to improve the soil quality. We made lasagna garden beds for each of the around the trees. And so then we planted about 700 native species of plants, and then about 30 fruit and nut trees. That was done in 2024. And then again, some of the challenges here is that it will mostly be us at KEPO who maintain it for the time being. And then again, maintaining it will involve, controlling invasive species, watering when it gets really hot, and then just making sure that the plants survive. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll skip to the next one. So another one that we did was a tree planting activity in 2021. I had made some satellite images of surface temperatures just to kind of have an idea of places in the community that would benefit the most from having leafy trees. So this is obviously kind of a long-term thing because obviously these trees were not very big. But as we know, when we plant trees, we're planting for the future, not necessarily for us right now. And so again, some of the challenges here, well, we planted about 500 species of native trees, and maintenance challenges here is again sort of dealing with mowing, like it was mentioned previously with like the turf. We had to plant the trees to make sure that the mowers could get in between them because we planted in kind of open parks that didn't really have many trees. So that was part of the challenge. And of course, we had to keep the trees alive, mostly in the first 3 years when they're sort of getting established. And then we had to put snow fencing to make sure that people didn't run over them in the winter with snowmobiles. So sort of things that we learn through experience over time. And then this was quite a large project in the recreation bay. This is also on the island that I had put the food forest. The aim of this project was to restore habitats, make recreational areas that had basically been impacted or affected or even removed when the St. Lawrence Seaway was created. So basically when the seaway was created, it cut off the community from the river that they'd relied on for centuries. And so when the seaway was made, as I had said, the dredge material made this island. And so the island had really not much going on. to and so the Bay project it dredged material between the island and the seaway. Um, sorry, in the Bay area. And that was to improve flow because the water was starting to, the sediment was starting to accumulate. And so then we made linear ponds on the island to kind of create a new wetland habitat. We created like a wall with bank swallow nesting. And then there were some rocks laid out in certain areas to make habitats for snakes. Um, so the maintenance here has been kind of a bit more involved. A lot of the problems we face are actually invasive species sort of returning, particularly Phragmites. So in this case, there's a lot of weeding, and again, that's mostly Kipo with the help of summer students when we have them. And finally, this is a kind of a future project that we're going to work on soon, which is a species at risk garden. So the last few years, we've been collecting seeds from black ash trees, which have been affected by the emerald ash borer. And then we've also been starting to collect from other species that are becoming more at risk. So the species at risk garden is just going to try to plant using those seeds and then just sort of try to propagate and 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 have a site that we can maintain sort of as a nursery for plants that are becoming more at risk. So I'll stop it there because otherwise it'll be a bit too long, I think.
No, no problem.
Sorry.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. That's great. Thanks everybody for all your contributions. Turning to our discussion, I am curious about folks' responses to some of the kind of insights and learnings and project examples from other folks on the panel. But in addition to that, I'll just also ask the question about those barriers, to green infrastructure maintenance and the kinds of barriers that you're seeing in your work. For example, limited funding or staff capacity, lack of knowledge or skills, and if you could contextualize that with some of the examples from your work, that'd be great. Who's up for jumping on it first?
Well, we have, I guess, here in Montreal, this was one of our main issues from the very start was that when we did plant our microforêt at Terry Fox Park. Belvedere Terry Fox is at the top of the Falaise Saint-Jacques, which is one of the major features of Montreal, on the western side of sort of the western slope of the mountain. And there was actually no way to water the plants because it turned out that the municipal water supply that was being relied upon by the city tree councilor was no longer and hadn't been for about a decade because no one had actually needed water in that park. And so even though it was on the map as there's water, there wasn't any. So we ended
Mm.
up buying 350 feet of hose from the local hardware store, making a deal with the Gamma Tool rental people to connect behind their facility, running it past the junkyard that's in between the Gamma Tool facility and our park, and watering by hand with volunteers from the top of the hill.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge one. And also some really clever thinking in terms of being able to tackle that challenge. Heather, do you want to jump in
I
on?
can just share the experience we've had when contractors have been asked either by the community partner or in the case where we were working with the city. So this is a landscaping company that would have been asked to or hired to look after the forest. And I will just share just a couple of quick images. So you can see at the end of the first growing season for this little mini forest, the trees and shrubs are looking pretty good. You might notice there's not a lot of mulch. So it should have been remulched before winter, and it was not. In the second growing season, the grass had started to take over. This is the turf grass surrounding the site growing in, and hub volunteers went in and we put pin flags in all the smaller shrubs and all of the forbs and the understory. And the contractors were supposed to use weed trimmers until they got close to the plants and then weed by hand. And the picture on the far right shows the aftermath of the first weed trimming where they kind of sort of did what they were supposed to. But I think with contractors, one of the challenges is the supervisor might have the instructions, but as it gets passed down to crew and the different crews come in, it gets lost. So you can see in this close-up the weed trimmer damage to the stems of the woody plants, and some of the little forbs that are hiding in the grasses, they just don't see. And they're hired by the hour. They're not going to spend time looking for these little plants. And so at the end of that third growing season in that forest, we've taken it off our mini forest list because it is trees, a few shrubs, and then it's just grass. And that contrasts to a forest that was planted a little bit later than that one, but well looked after. And the hand sticking up in the middle of the slide is me saying, I'm over here because you can't see through the forest. And we have a good diversity of shrubs, and there's lots of understory forbs. And that's what we're not seeing when we have contractors involved. And I think, that was the forest that we did with the city, so that's one thing, but now we're finding some of our community partners are saying we're not getting enough volunteers out, we're going to hire contractors, and we're trying to navigate that conversation with them to say we can't tell you what to do, but don't do that. And
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
help them find other solutions.
Interesting. Super interesting, Heather. Yeah, Jay, go ahead.
So challenges for us. I think kind of along the same lines as Heather had pointed out, but part of it is with our own folks. So when we started the naturalization back in the early 2000s, it was really kind of here and there. So a little planting here, a little planting there, little islands here and there. And I think part of what happened, although the intention was good, part of what happened was it annoyed some of our turf operators, who, they've got equipment that's of a certain size, they've got a lot to do in a short period of time. So we were having issues with corners of beds, or whole beds, getting mown down either accidentally, and sometimes kind of felt like maybe they were trying to send a message, about, they called it coloring outside the lines. Like, here's the area that you said you were going to do, but the people that did it, they actually did more than they were supposed to. And this created these narrow channels that were too small for the equipment. Um, So a couple of slides that I showed, I think we've made great progress. And one of those things, one of the big things for us has been really leveraging the technology to be able to get a better view of where we've been, where we would like to go, and sort of how we're getting there. So with our planting, um, part of my job is to look for those planting areas. So I'm looking for those spaces where those isolated beds are, and like, can we connect those up? Can we work with our trip operators to make the mowing more efficient? And it really seems to be working.
That's
And really connecting with them and getting their advice and their thoughts on what works for you and what doesn't. It's a two-way street. Sometimes we have to push back on them saying that the world does not operate based on your 16-foot mower deck. There's got to be some give back here. um, but I think that's really been a great way for us to overcome that key challenge. And there was a question that popped up that I did respond to about the applications that we have. So they're all based on ArcView GIS, and our department, the Parks Department, has one GIS technologist. And what he's been doing over the last several years since we really ramped up a lot of these programs is working directly with the groups and coming in and saying, what do you guys, what kind of data do you guys need? How can we customize this for you? So he's built these custom applications for all of our different groups. And
very cool.
it's been a real game changer for many of them. And there was a question also about the watering app that I showed. And this particular one is for the caliper trees, and it's really quite interesting because it has a time function on it. So the color of the dots change if a certain tree has not been watered after a certain number of days. So rather than our watering crews going out and just haphazardly or thinking they need to go to this neighborhood, they can see which neighborhoods are getting to that threshold, so they can really operate a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, super, super smart.
Yeah. So that
Really
technology has been a real game changer for us to overcome some of the challenges.
awesome. Very cool to hear. I mean, it sounds like a couple threads here. One is that when volunteers are rooted in a project, community members that really come together to really try to like, own a project, that there's a great deal of care that goes along with that. Some challenges though identified, Heather, you mentioned that with that model is the scale question, is that at times it can be challenging to find volunteers and really be able to invest. City contractors, we can throw money at the problem, but a challenge there is that they're sometimes they don't have the proper equipment to be able to carry out the job at hand. The Friday afternoon, the problem of a young student who's on a job who just wants to get ahead to the weekend. Jay, that was one you mentioned in our prep call. And then the use of technology as well, and being able to leverage technology to be able to assist with some of this in addition to kind of those training components for staff. I think all those are super interesting. I want to ask another question, which is around myths and misconceptions. And that I'm really curious about to dig in on with folks on the call is what are the myths and misconceptions that you most commonly encounter with the value and the benefits of maintaining green infrastructure? And I'd be, keen to hear from folks we haven't heard from quite yet. Marina, Tiana, thoughts from both of you on kind of myths and misconceptions, and also open to everybody.
I can start if you like.
Please.
I'd say for our case, we don't have yet like a sort of typical engineered green infrastructure yet, but there's definitely interest, and we're hoping to do a pilot project maybe next year. But definitely one of the misconceptions is that it's definitely going to be more expensive than kind of traditional gray infrastructure. I think just speaking with people from other units, like the capital unit or the public works, they're always like, no, that's going to cost a fortune. We're going to have to retrain everybody to maintain it. It's just going to be too hard.
Mm.
And I don't think that's quite true. I think it's change, and change is scary. But there is a housing project in Ganawage that will include a rain garden. So that's sort of one of the first projects that's going to be going in shortly.
Mm.
So we'll see what that entails, but yeah, we don't really have the experience yet with maintaining those types of projects yet.
Interesting. Yeah. Thanks for that, Marina. Tiana, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I hear two myths. So one is what Marina was talking about, that maintenance is more expensive than gray infrastructure and harder. But then we also sometimes hear the myth of that green infrastructure needs no maintenance. So kind of what Heather was talking about, where you can just kind of plant a project and then just let it ride. And that's not necessarily true either. So yeah, just kind of the belief that once you plant, that you can just let nature take over and that there's no need for long-term maintenance. Like I talked a little bit about, oftentimes maintenance for green infrastructure is less intensive than maintaining gray infrastructure, and it does require some community support and kind of more of that kind of landscaping and um, park maintenance activities. But yeah, there is definitely activities that you can do. It evolves over the course of the project. So what you may do in year one or two of the kind of implementation stage is different as sites mature. But we do also have some resources that maybe I can link in the chat a little bit later. But we did a project with Western University students, and they kind of created a guidebook for maintenance over the long term for different types of green infrastructure implementations, and it provides a little checklist. So
Cool. That's awesome. That's yeah, super insightful. We're sadly right button up against time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time who is able to come in, for the hour. Deeply appreciative for everybody that spent the hour with us, and extra appreciative as well of our panelists today, Karen and Heather and Marina and Jay and Tiana. Really grateful for your time today. We'll be sharing out the presentation. It's recorded as we discussed, and there'll be some follow-ups as well based on some of the questions in the chat. Um, Huge thank you, and a couple notes here, in addition to the thanks, including, really talking about the need for GI and nature-based solutions in your community and professional work. Please feel free to reach out anytime and use our resources. Also, subscribe to GC News for updates on our next events and green infrastructure programming. There's lots of folks on this call who are doing all kinds of amazing things in the months ahead, planting new projects and maintaining existing projects. Keep up the good work, and there'll also be a post-event survey for you to fill out. But thanks to everybody for joining us today. All the best, and talk to you again soon.
Thanks very much for hosting us. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, and thank you.
Bye.